Welcome, Mr. Bovo. How are you?
Thank you, Naomi. Thank you for the opportunity, and hello to all those that are watching at home.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for being here. We appreciate that during general elections, you could have chosen to be anywhere, but you did make the decision to be here with the Haitian American community, and we appreciate that. Mr. Bovo, we're going to go right into it. We know that as a candidate, there are so many topics to discuss, but specifically as Haitian Americans, we believe that there are some key things that are dear to us. But before we go into those things that are dear to us, we want to know about you. For many of us, we've heard Steve Bovo for the first time. We did not know who you were, and now that we have been introduced to you throughout forums and I had a forum, and there were so many other individuals that hosted forums. Now we want to hear, who is the man? Please share your story. Tell us about you. Tell us about the individual.
Born in Queens, New York. I'm the oldest of 5 children, Cuban parents. My dad was a Bay of Pigs veteran, military pilot, and I think his experience had a profound effect, not only obviously on him, but on his entire family, being raised in a home that was very conservative, fiscally conservative, and at the same time, I think politically conservative. And as we were growing up, I saw my parents. They built a small business. I was employed. My sister was employed. Had a cousin. These are issues or experiences in life that start guiding and molding you as a young adult, and then that philosophy kind of takes hold as you get older. So I saw, the plight of the business owner, the hard work, no guaranteed check, make sure your employees and contractors and vendors are being paid. You never disconnect when you own a business. You're always thinking in terms of how to improve, and those I think are things that impacted me, and I saw it. And as I got older, I started becoming very politically aware of my surroundings. I was growing up during an era when we were seeing the geopolitical landscape in Nicaragua impact us in South Florida as Nicaraguans were coming here, fleeing the Sandinista government. And I think experiences of having conversations with them made me even more aware how Miami-Dade grows because of chaos in other places. It's kind of weird to say it, and not saying it as a great model of development, but issues in Haiti, Miami benefits, Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Colombia. These issues in their countries, we benefit because not only do we get the cultural diversity and experience, the good food, the vitality of their people. Usually what ends up coming over are folks that are, in my mind, conservative, business-minded folks that want to invest in the community, raise their children. And I think that's the beauty of Miami-Dade County. That's probably the beauty of our country. We're very diverse as a community, but I don't think we're divided. And, I was honored to serve my community for 20 years, the city of Hialeah as a council member, state representative, and now as a commissioner really representing that area. And I acknowledge I've, for a long time, represented people that look like me, talked like me, and ate at the restaurants I ate. And I, through the evolution of my participation in the Board of County Commission, getting to meet my different colleagues, Sean Monestine, Haitian American, who I supported for chair while I was his vice chair, African American colleagues of mine, other Cuban American, you get a better understanding of the county. And for me, I thought it was very important. If I want to be mayor, and I want to be mayor for everybody in the county, then I need to get out of that comfort zone that is a district and get out to the bigger community and be able to meet, talk, and then come to the realization that we all want the same things. It doesn't matter where you live. Folks in North Miami want the same things that folks in Homestead want.
Well, one of the things I want to touch on is your public servant. You stated that this is not your first time, right? We know that you are currently a sitting commissioner, but tell us a little bit about the experiences that you've had in public service prior to being a commissioner.
Well, I was a council member in the city of Hialeah for 10 years. during a relatively prosperous time in our community, where we saw our budgets increase, not because of tax increase, but because property values were just going up. It's a blue-collar town. Hialeah is a very, very hard-working community. Many folks in the city of Hialeah that own businesses that are small in nature, mom and pop operations. And I've always tried to make it a mission to make sure that their voices were being heard in City Hall in Hialeah. I went to the state legislature, which was the first time ever in my life that I was participating in a partisan body. Hialeah, just like the commission in Miami-Dade County, is nonpartisan. The services we provide and the money that's paid by taxpayers is never measured in blue or red. It's green, and we need to make sure that that investment is being paid back through services, whether it's police, fire, water and sewer, garbage pickup. But when I went to the legislature, it was the first time that I ever was told how to vote. And I realized that the partisan end of politics in the Florida legislature, for example, similar to what goes on in Washington, D.C., it's all decided amongst red or blue. And ultimately, I'm not sure, for me, it wasn't the space that I wanted to participate in. I didn't like being told how to vote. We had a recall here in Miami-Dade County, a recall that removed a mayor and a sitting commissioner, never done for ever in the history of Miami-Dade County. And that first chance I got when that commissioner was removed was that I decided I wanted to come back home and do what I felt was my calling, which is to work in the local government, that direct service. I didn't like being away from my kids either, by the way.
Of course, and let's go quickly. Tell us a little bit about your children.
5 blessed and had never given me any headaches. They're much better kids than I was when I was a kid. My oldest is a sitting council member now. He's my stepson, but he's been with me since the age of 3. So in essence, he's my son. And he's the sitting council member. He's a lawyer, very proud of. He's also done some acting. I have a daughter who works at FIU, who works in the diversity programs at FIU. She got her master's at UCF and now, like I said, employed at FIU. I have a son who's an actor, stage actor in New York, which means usually he's unemployed. But he came back from New York now during COVID because there was no work going on. I have a daughter who is now at Florida State. So therefore, my money goes to Florida State, but we were rooting for University of Miami last night. And then I have a 10-year-old, because God has a sense of humor.
Yes, he does.
And sent me a 10-year-old at 58, which is all good, all blessings. So at dinner table, we could either have a conversation about politics or we could talk about superheroes. And you better be up to speed on all of it. So. Wow.
So tell us, at the dinner table, when you decided to have the discussion around politics and state that you wanted to run for county mayor, what was that like?
Well, I had to ask permission of my wife first, clearly.
Of course.
And, I've been blessed because my wife's experience also is in politics. And she works with the U.S. Senator Marco Rubio, and she handles the Western Hemisphere for him. And basically, she's a senior policy advisor on the Western Hemisphere. And which, interestingly, when I went to school, that's kind of what I wanted to do, was to be a policy person on Central and South America. And lo and behold, that's what she does, and the Caribbean also. And so she was supportive. I've been supportive of her in her career. She travels a lot, leaves me alone a lot with my 10-year-old pre-COVID. She would travel about 3 to 4 days out of the week. But God does work in mysterious ways, and throughout this COVID, she's had to stay home, which has, in essence, given me the ability to campaign. I could not do this if my wife was traveling 4 days out of the week, because the interruption in my son's life of having to drag him with me to all the different events that I go to, that just probably wouldn't have worked. But here we are.
Wow, here we are. And let's talk specifically what the differences are between you and your opponent.
Well, in the fact, the obvious, that we're male and female. Look, I think this race, Naomi, pits 2 completely opposing philosophical points of view of what your county government should be. I'm a firm believer that each person that's watching this transmission that owns a home, owns property, pays taxes, engages its local government to provide a set of services that should take us to an issue of quality of life. The garbage pickup, the police, fire, water, sewer, all these are integral spaces that we invest in to make sure that the quality of life in our communities are above standard. Safety and security is key to economic development. No one will come and invest in your community if it's crime-ridden. If potholes are not fixed, that slum and blight visual does not bring economic development. That's what we in local government, I believe, we should be doing. My opponent, who's a decent person, and I have no personal issues with her, but I believe her philosophy of what local government should be doing is similar to what they're doing in Washington, which is to feed a social agenda, which is important, but I think probably more important that we as society handle social issues. Maybe the state and the federal government should play more of a role, but our local government is very clear what we engage it to do. And I think that's the fundamental difference. There are others, you know, she supports defunding the police, I don't. She supports programs like living wage and rent control, which I believe are all issues that are important to address. But if we attribute that in our local government, we could have catastrophic results to it. And wherever it's been tried before, quite honestly, it hasn't worked. So my hope is that, you know, in this campaign that, you know, we'll be able to see the differences in philosophy and what the vision we have long-term. Radical ideas end up costing taxpayers much, much more money. And having a conservative approach with your money, the way we invest your money, I think is probably the best way to go.
Commissioner, Miami-Dade County is a $9 billion entity managed by a strong mayor. What does that mean to be a strong mayor, and what are the duties of a county mayor? And, you know, give it to us in layman terms for someone who has absolutely no clue.
Yeah, $9 billion means that your county government is larger than some states and some countries, to be perfectly honest with you. The magnitude of the budget that we expend in Miami-Dade County is daunting. Probably not fit for any one person to be able to manage. A mayor that's elected would probably have to surround himself with a team of professionals that can help guide. We do have some of those entities already. The port, if you separate that, and if you separate the airport, then the total budget number really comes down to maybe a little bit over $4 billion. It's still a staggering number. You know, the role of the mayor is to make sure that the day-to-day operations of the county are being carried out. We have fiduciary responsibilities with that money to provide the services that I've talked about, you know, but it also involves to making sure that we're doing it in a quality way. If your garbage is not being picked up when it has to go out by 12 o'clock, that's a problem in our community. And the mayor, in essence, needs to make sure that that department director and that department is working as the way it should be. But in the global scheme of things, the county budget in reality, once you start taking out all the commitments that are made, employment commitments, benefit commitments, the money you need to set aside for healthcare insurance, you start dwindling that pot of money and it gets lower and lower and lower. And what ultimately ends up happening is really you're only talking about a discretionary fund where you could literally move dollars at whim of something like about $25 to $30 million. So when you start whittling down that massive budget, you start to realize that the money you have at disposition, I'm sorry, I should have said $200 million, the money that you have at your disposition to move around and invest in certain things really starts to shrink. And that's something that's important for people to understand. So when they say $9 billion, they say, oh my goodness, this is massive, that's too big. But it really isn't as big as you would think once you boil it down to.
Commissioner, we could not have this conversation today and not talk about coronavirus. Tell us, within the first 100 days, if you were fortunate to become the next mayor for Miami-Dade County, what is your plan? What is your vision?
Well, I think what we do instantly, and this is immediately after getting elected, is you call for a meeting with every single mayor of Miami-Dade County. You have 35 mayors in Miami-Dade and administrators, and I'd call for a meeting because we all have to get on the same page. I think one of the biggest frustrations many of our residents have experienced over the last 7 months is this counter instructions that have happened between the county and cities. So the county says this is going to happen, and then some cities will say, no, we don't want to do it that way, and they go back and forth on each other. And all it does really is set a lot of confusions for the residents in our community. So I think as the quicker we are all on one page, we speak as one, we come into an agreement on how we could handle these things, I think that gives better information for our residents. When you get to talking about businesses, those that are watching us should take into account, if you ever question the power of small government has literally put a paralysis on our economy. We have shut you down, not only of your businesses, we've literally shut down movement. We have a curfew in place. I mean, these are things that are now impacting your daily lives. That's the power of the local government. And what I would submit to you is I'm interested in having a dialogue, although now the governor has kind of weighed in, and we're going to open restaurants at 100%, and we're going to start being a little bit more flexible. But I believe still, as mayor, the safety and security of our residents is extremely important. It's probably priority number one. So we need to work together. I'll wear the mask in respect out of you. You'll respect it out of respect to me. And I think we need to talk to our business leaders and say, look, let's open in a responsible way. Take care of your employees. Take care of your customers. Make it safe for your customers. Let's not have to pivot against business again if we have a spike in coronavirus, and understand that we may have to learn how to live with the virus for a period of time, because there's no guarantee there's going to be a vaccine offered, and anything cooked up in a couple of months, Naomi, this is how zombie movies start, okay? I'm not sure if I'm going to expose my arm. I'm with you on that.
Okay? I'm not interested either.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
So let's see if we could work in a way where let's reward responsibility, and let's punish irresponsibility. And I just think that if we work in a space where we do the social distancing, we wear the mask, we collaborate with businesses in a way that businesses can say, look, I'm going to open, and these are the steps I'm going to take. And then government can say, I'm going to hold you to it. Instead of me giving you the remedy, tell me how you're going to operate. Give me your plan. We could even put a star on your door that says, complies with whatever, and let's do it that way. And I hold you responsible. And I figure that way, not only can we open our economy in a more efficient way, we could get things rolling. I got people in my community that haven't worked for 7 months. That's big. And
to be perfectly honest with you, the next question is about school. I am looking for a tutor for my 4-year-old, and he should be starting that great program that was established so many years ago in order to ensure that he's not left behind, that by the time he gets to kindergarten, he's gone through pre-K. So please tell me, what's your position on that?
Yeah, and I met your son. He's a beautiful kid, and he needs to be in school. And like my kid, my 10-year-old needs to be in school. He starts tomorrow. Look, the pandemic has impacted our children in ways that we perhaps don't even comprehend at this point. The social interaction that our children need, I think, has been hampered greatly. My son does not fare well when he has to be put on Zoom. He's a child that needs interaction with his teacher. His eyes start darting throughout the entire image on his screen, and he's looking at all his friends when he's not looking at his teacher. And that could be a bit of a challenge. I went to school in a time when we used to do split shift. I may be dating myself. Maybe nobody that's watching, especially anybody under the age of 50, may not know what I'm going to talk about. But when I went to school, we did split shift. And we had a group of kids that would go in the morning and the afternoon. This is how Miami-Dade County's public school system dealt with overcrowding back in the late 70s. So I did that for junior high one year. I did that for high school one year. And I wonder, and I ask myself, with all of today's technology that we have, why isn't that we can't install some sort of hybrid system in our schools where a group of children could be in the classroom on Monday, and that's another group at home via Skype or Zoom, flip it on Tuesday, flip it back on Wednesday, and give the ability so some kids could have with teacher interaction and other kids can continue in Zoom. Give parents the choice. If they want their child to stay on the Zoom classes, allow them. If they want their child to go to school, if we could accommodate the space, let's do that too. That way we keep our teachers safe. We could use our classroom space for social distancing, and we're not lagging behind in that interaction that children need. And I think that's something that it's doable, We should trust our children a little more. I think they're more aware of what's going on. They're probably more visual of what's going on. But I think we need to get them back. And if for any reason we can't open our economy at full throttle, if we've got parents that can't go back to work because their kids are at school, or at home.
Mr. Bovo, let's talk about what I believe is going to be the next pandemic here in Miami-Dade County, dealing with evictions. Within minutes of where we sit right now at our studio, I've had people come in here and ask for assistance. I'm literally right now currently working with a family to help them raise $3,887 through my nonprofit because they did not completely understand the moratorium. Although there is a rule set that the judge cannot sign for possession, the process of eviction can take place. And they did not know that they had 5 days in order to respond, or else it would be a default against them. So please share with us your views on that and how you believe the county will be able to step up to the plate and assist these families.
Yeah, that's the tail end of that pandemic that we're going to have to be dealing with, and we're going to be dealing with for a while. So let me say this first. I think the issue of rent, mortgages, bondholders, shareholders, this is going to require federal and state involvement. The county cannot handle this on its own. I want to be perfectly clear. I don't want to mislead anybody. The county has not the ability nor the power to put a screeching halt. We could suspend evictions, and I would encourage the mayor, until we get to a level of healthiness in our economy, that we should not be evicting. I would even encourage out of the governor. I mean, we should continue the moratorium on eviction as long as we can. I'm also aware of the fact that you've got mortgage holders that owe their bank. And especially if that's what they live off, the rent that they charge, they're into a problem. And that ripple effect continues upward. Mortgage holders, have to answer to shareholders and bondholders. And I think for me, this is going to take a multi-level approach, federal, state, and local, with this understanding. And I'm directing myself as much to the renter as I am to the rentor, as I am to the mortgage holder. Everything we're experiencing right now is a government-induced coma. I know it's a reaction to the pandemic, but government did this, okay? Not a bad investment, not a bad climate, not a collapse of the stock market. This is government-induced. And that pain may have to be felt equally across the board. That means that renter, we may need to encourage ways that they could catch up and maybe understand to the rentor that renter may not have to be able to pay or should not have to be liable for all, especially if they've been out of a job. And then the same thing goes attributed to those banks, the ones that hold the note.
Yes.
Perhaps there may need to be some accommodation so that, this pain that we're feeling is equal. It's unfair to tell somebody who's renting, who has lost their job at no fault of their own, if they work in the cruise industry, for example, and have a landlord that basically has said to them, you need to pay me your rent. And I know there are many cases where people are reacting and interacting with each other. Here's the danger, though, when we try to insert government into the space. 2 things could happen. One is a rent control program. And I can tell you, Naomi, rent control works nowhere. Nowhere.
I'm from New York.
Good, then I don't have to elaborate. It works nowhere. But what it leads to is slum and blight. What it leads to is units that are unkept. No one invests in them. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Tried in other countries, doesn't work. And then the second thing is that the county creates some sort of rental assistance program. And not to be insensitive, but you and I, many watching, we pay taxes. We pay taxes for all the services that I've been talking. When you create a rental assistance program with county money, what ends up happening is that there will never be enough money. And at some point you start moving dollars that should be going to fire or road repair, and you're putting them into a rent subsidy program. I don't think it works. We've done it with federal dollars, and I'm okay with that. Okay. Using federal dollars to give folks rental assistance. It won't be enough though. We've moved $5 million, if I'm mistaken. It may be more, I don't remember the exact dollar amount, but we put money into a rental assistance program and then spread it out throughout the entire county. It won't make a dent. It won't make a dent in what you have rightly called another pandemic.
Yes, and I can share with you that in the city of North Miami, this particular renter was able to receive $1,000, right, towards these $3,887, but they still need to come up with the $2,800, and the landlord is not willing to sign I will not evict unless he gets all the money. So I understand that there needs to be a balance. You have to look at the renter, you have to look at the landlord, and find a way where everybody can walk away with this, not happy, but okay.
And I think there's two other thoughts on that. Number one, obviously that landlord should be cooperative, because I have news flash to the landlord. If the tenants you have are evicted and leave, no one's going to replace them, because of the situation that we have in place right now. So, word to the wise is it better to have somebody in the unit that at least will take care of the unit while they're there. So that's a private arrangement between landlord and tenant. Again, due to a government-induced coma to our economy. And then the other thing that I would like to see is that, and this maybe we could do something legislatively, is that we do not punish the renter as far as bad credit due to what has happened, so that they could go ahead and move and get another unit. So, we don't want to punish them, because I don't think it's their fault. This is a government reaction to something, of which I would tell you, Naomi, if we had a flashback, if we could go back in time, I think we may have handled this a little differently. Maybe we would have been more cautious. Instead of shut everything down, put everybody out on the street, or, just stop work, perhaps we would have handled it differently. More responsibility, more mask wearing, more social distancing, enforce rules. Maybe, just maybe. I hate to do this because, people make decisions and then we got to work with those decisions. But obviously in hindsight now, I just wonder, could we have addressed it differently than the way we did? And now a lot of people are suffering. And as you say, we're going to be suffering for a while.
For a while.
Not to mention our economy is going to suffer, because we haven't measured what this is going to do to property values, and that's going to hit our county budget also. So we need to kind of be wise the way we measure this now.
There's a lot at stake. A lot at stake. You have not been shy about not defunding the police. Please share with us why you have that stand, and what do you believe, what type of reforms can be done outside of defunding?
Yeah, look, I think defunding the police is crazy talk. Anybody that's law-abiding, anybody that is interested in safety and security would tell you, what are we going to turn our streets into? We've seen instances of what, lawlessness looks like. In Portland, they burn Bibles. In Chicago, New York. I don't want Miami-Dade County to be a reflection of what has gone on in those communities. People are leaving those places. People are leaving California, San Francisco, they're going into Nevada. In Los Angeles, they're going into Arizona. They can't live in places where, the budget just keeps growing and growing and growing. And then talk about moving money from your priorities. This is what we do in county government. We provide you with police, fire, safety. This is what you need. And to defund it is crazy talk. Our police department, though, and it's interesting because there are overlaying jurisdictions. You have the City of Miami Police Department. We operate the county's police department. So in North Miami, you have the North Miami Police Department, not the counties. We provide some services for them, whether it may be helicopter, some laboratory, forensic, prison situations that the county provides for a municipality like that, just like they did for Hialeah. I will tell you what I'm proud of our department that many people may not know. Our department today, every cadet that goes through our system is trained by a group of ex-felons called the Circle of Brotherhood. This group of folks, primarily in the Liberty City and Brownsville area, which are guys that destroy their neighborhood by their own admission, by their actions as they were growing up. They went to prison, they come back, and now they see their kids going down the same path, and they don't want that. And they want to take full responsibility for their neighborhood. And they offer the police a very unique way of collaborating with them. Train our cadets. Many of our police officers that have never had interaction with African Americans in our community, many of our African American police officers that have never had interaction with Cuban Americans or Hispanics. are now being trained and exposed at a street level by folks that have been in prison at one time and want to educate them on some of the idiosyncrasies of our cultures. That's something that nobody knows. It's very, very progressive. You know, nobody else does this. In South Florida, we do it. Not only with our county department, we also do it with the city of Miami. People don't know that. We wear body cams now. You know, the union didn't like it. And by the way, the union is supporting me. The PBA and the FOPs of all the different municipalities are supporting me. We have body cams on. Officers didn't like it because obviously they feel it may inhibit their way to police. I see it the other way. It's now changing the interaction between the police officer and the person they're confronting. Person knows there's a camera on, they're not mouthing off. Cop knows there's a camera on, he's following procedures or she's following procedures. And I think it lends to a better interaction. But there are some reforms that I think we could look at that I think would help.
What are those reforms?
You know, why do we take kids that are right out of high school and put them through an academy and then put a badge and a gun on them? Naomi, at 19, I would have been very ill-equipped to carry a badge and a gun. I think back, Steve Bovo at 19, no way. So why don't we perhaps insist on that wannabe police officer, would-be police officer to go and get a 2-year degree at least. You know, get some knowledge.
I'm telling you, that would weed out a whole...
Well, I think what it does, and I asked recently, I recently asked the chief of the police department in the city of Miami, how many applicants do you guys get when you have a vacancy of, let's say, 60 offers? You know, they got 1,000 people. And I said, I'd be interested to see, of the 1,000, how many of those have some sort of college degree or at least served in the military? So that maybe we could prioritize and kind of give them a little bit better rating because of that. Because like I said, right out of high school, that's a little slippery slope, right?
It's a lot of responsibility.
I think so.
And if the person had never had any type of discipline,
oh my,
or if they have a lot of bias and
absolutely. And now you're exposing them to a situation where you're putting somebody in danger, not to mention they're putting themselves in danger. So I think that's a reform that we could look at. And then another area that I think is appropriate that we kind of like is that if you come from another department and you have disciplinary actions against you in that department, that should disqualify you from being an applicant for Miami-Dade Police Department. So if you had an issue in Hialeah with violence, or you have in your record there are disciplinary actions, especially those that border on abuse of power. Well, I don't want that kind of officer under my jurisdiction as mayor. So I would draw the line there and say perhaps that officer isn't qualified to join our police department. And then there's another thing I think we could do, which is I think helps the police officer. So follow me for a second. A policewoman walks into a scene where there's a murdered child. And we expect that police officer within an hour and a half to be back out on the street patrolling. Now, I would tell you, the human mind is not equipped to absorb those kind of things and then just go about your day like normal. I think there's an impact. And now take that same officer who's just left a scene where there's a murdered child, and that officer could be a mother or a father, and they're out on the street now. They pull over some young person who now wants to start debating with the police officer if they roll the stop or they don't roll the stop. And I wonder, that officer, taking in what they have just seen, do we provide enough counseling? This is a very macho job that we have. Men and women, they are rough. They stand up, right, to a lot of pressure. But should we almost make it mandatory that when you go to a scene like that, go home for the day? We'll replace you. Because I wonder sometimes, what does that put that officer in that situation coming off a scene where their mind is still thinking of what they just saw? I don't know if it's an unwise reform. I think it's a reform that, I don't even know if I'd call it a reform. I think it's like almost like a common sense, human nature thing to say, hey, this is a tough scene. Go home, and we got you. We'll get somebody else to cover for you. Just as a way, I think, of maybe an evolution in our department that makes it a better interaction ultimately. Because you don't know what happens after that. I mean, think about it sometimes. We come off from an argument or something, and the first person we see, we take it out on them. Kind of the same thought process.
And along those lines, what should happen when an officer uses excessive force, or when an officer takes a life, like the Breonna Taylor situation? As mayor, what is your position there?
Yeah, look, I understand that the job that police do is not for the faint of heart, and it takes a certain man or woman to be able to do that work. And every case has its interaction that we need to be able to see. We have our independent review panel, and I voted against it. I don't like to be a hypocrite. I voted against it, but I think now we have one, and I think that should be afforded while we go through our normal investigatory process.
Why did you vote against it?
Well, I thought it was a reaction, and I want to get back to your question because I don't want to ignore it. I thought it was a reaction, quite honestly, to what happened in Minnesota.
Okay.
We had an independent review panel 10 years ago, and we had to collapse it because of funding, because of the economic collapse. And that department, we had, I believe it was about 50 officers arrested or dismissed due to misconduct with an IRP. Fast forward the next 10 years without an IRP, instilling more internal review process from their own police department. We've had more police officers dismissed or thrown out or arrested from the department than when we had one. Okay. So it seemed to me that there was a process that it was working. Not a perfect department, but it was working. This is not the department of the McDuffie and Lozano riots. This is a different department that has evolved over time. We're very, very integrated, very diverse in our police department. Again, I want those to understand I'm talking about the brown shirts of the Miami-Dade Police Department, not the city of Miami or any other jurisdiction. So I just felt there was a knee-jerk reaction to what had happened in Minnesota, of which I thought a great opportunity for us to have conversations about race relations, racial disparity got lost because another element took over. And I'm sure we'll cover more of that.
Yes,
but getting back to what I thought in the Breonna Taylor case, look, I don't know what the rules and procedures are for when you're going to go and serve a search warrant. I could only go based on what I've been reading, and obviously what we can't do ever in any kind of situation is that police have to now think 3 times before they react, because those 3 times either could cost them their lives or could cost the lives of somebody that they're trying to help. So what I do believe is that in the evolution of our procedures and our protocols, we need to make sure that they follow them to the letter. Police officers that violate our procedures and protocols and just kind of go at it on their own, they're not going to be tolerated under my administration. They're not going to be tolerated under my mayorship in my department. Okay? Our job is to provide safety and security. That's our job. And I want it to happen in every segment of our community where we are at play. You know, it's unfortunate what happened with Breonna Taylor. Yes. As I'm seeing the details, it looked to me like something that went completely upside down. But I would tell you, you know, perhaps product of an environment where, you know, drug dealers reign and where law-abiding citizens have to find themselves locked in their own homes. Seems to me, by all the evidence that I'm seeing, is that the interaction started with a group of people thinking that somebody was coming in us to rob. I think I might have taken the same precautions if I was living inside my home. You know, and these are things that are unfortunate in society. I don't know how this ends at the end of the day. I do know this: we have a life that is lost. And that we should all lament, to be perfectly honest with you.
Commissioner, I am originally from New York, and I cannot imagine New York or the 5 boroughs without mass transit. Needless to say, we have a huge transportation problem in Miami-Dade.
You think?
My God. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's probably if it wasn't for COVID-19, we would probably be talking more about transportation than any other subject in this campaign. We failed. We have failed residents in our community probably for the last 40 years. We've developed car friendly, and that car friendliness speaks to giant surface parking lots, strip malls. It speaks to our experience of going to the market, to the movies, to dinner. Everything is tied to the car. It is what it is. I think we need to take this into consideration. I can't force you on a bus. And there is no transit plan, none, that is going to take away lanes of traffic and give it to buses. It's just not going to happen. The revolt in our community would be massive. 96% of our community moves via car. But that doesn't mean all hope is lost. There's a lot going on in transportation. We're going to have a south corridor with BRT, which will allow the buses to run unimpeded, go through intersections with guardrails that go down into stations that look like train stations with platform landings. What makes that all exciting, if you're in Florida City, you'll be able to get to the Dayland station, train station in 25 minutes, where now it would take you probably about 45 minutes to 1 hour, depending on traffic. But what makes that all exciting is all the development that could come around those stations. Okay. And that will feed what I would hope is the density issues and ridership numbers that will allow us then to graduate to rail. At the same time, I think people should understand what's going up and down this northeast corridor of our county. Mm-hmm. You've got the Brightline station in downtown, a station that's going to be built in Aventura, an identification of stations all up and down this northeast rail line that's going to give real alternatives to folks that live in this part of the county. You're going to have a real alternative. You may not want to leave your car, but at least you're going to have a choice. And I think that's very, very important. Absolutely. You're going to see an evolution of what could be possibly a link between downtown Miami and the beaches, which has been talked about forever in this community. Would probably be with a public-private intervention, just like the Northeast Corridor. We're going to see Tri-Rail go into downtown Miami. I mean, so people in Broward will have an alternative, and those that work out in Broward could use from downtown Miami, so there's a lot going on in transportation. I feel this is the obligation that we have to a future generation. My kids may choose to move differently than the way I chose to move. And I think it's important that we fulfill that responsibility, give them an alternative, at least that. And if we do that, now saying that, we got issues out in West Dade, and people out in West Dade want an extension of the 836 expressway. And they want it just to be able to alleviate those that live way out west in the West Dade area, out by Tamiami Airport, give them an alternative, because today they got to drive eastbound, and it usually takes them an hour just to get to one of the main arteries. That's not quality of life. That's not, I think, what we aspire to people in our community. In order to have quality of life, you need to have mobility, you need to have peace of mind. So to me, the biggest commitment, short of the economic recovery with COVID, is that, exclusively that, working on transportation. That's why we didn't get Amazon. We could not solve the issue of transit. And if we ever needed an Amazon, COVID has demonstrated to us, because we live off tourism. In order for us to diversify our economy, have those boxes that come in that produce the $100,000 paying jobs instead of the minimum wage paying jobs that the tourism industry produces, then we need to address this issue. For anything, for that, we need to address it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back. Due to COVID-19, many organizations need a safe and equipped place to host meetings and to broadcast live on many social media platforms. BL Workspace can help. All you really need to do is come in and start your live events with whom you wish to connect with. You can connect with church congregations, small businesses, or throw a concert. We are here to help. With a crew of 1 or 2 people and with a strict social distance protocol in place, this is the place where you can hold your virtual meetings. BL Workspace, connecting people and organizations. Call us now to book 786-440-8121. You can also connect with us on Instagram at BL Workspaces. We are live at the BL studio with a conversation with mayoral candidate, Mr. Steve Bovo. Thank you so very much for the first segment that we just went through. And opening up the second segment, we want to talk about, all of the things that are being said currently in the news and what's going on and the responses that you've had, because we want to understand your position.
Of course.
Okay. As a candidate, on your website, it says that my candidacy is based on conservative principles to protect taxpayer dollars, ensure transparency, fairness, and fiscal responsibility. What does it mean to be a conservative for you?
Well, I think for conservative, it all lays out what I just said in the statement or what you just read. Being conservative is that you don't misspend people's money. You don't take other people's money and go on an adventure and try to do things with it that goes against the general wishes of those that pay taxes. So for me, being a fiscal conservative, being a political conservative, means just that. Just have a DNA that wants to be mindful that in the charge that I have as mayor or commissioner, I need to be wise with the money that folks send us and make sure that we are fulfilling the mission of what county government was designed to do.
Okay. Recently, there was an article about your brother in the Miami Times. You were quoted saying, "I don't see any evidence of systemic racism in county government." Please share with us a little bit about this article and your response.
Yeah, my brother did a stupid thing. And unfortunately, it's something that I think he's probably ashamed of. But my brother's 48 years old and he has to own whatever he gets involved in. He got into a page of which I think it was said, "I hate BLM," or I don't really understand the page was. I never even saw it until the reporter mentioned it to me. My brother's not really involved in my campaign, but I love my brother dearly. I would tell you that he's not a racist. My brother has spent the better part of his life raising his son by himself. The mother of my nephew left my brother and my nephew, and he's basically had to raise him through hard work. He's dedicated his life to his son. He's been coaching football. He's been coaching football for a long, long time. And in fact, many times in my house, my brother has brought over African-American kids that he's mentored for Thanksgiving, for Christmas Eve dinner. So I don't think he's, his intention to get involved in something like that, and I really don't know how he did it, was for racist motives. What we have seen, I will tell you, Naomi, is that this banner of movement of Black Lives Matter, it seems to be, in my opinion, being hijacked by a bunch of white kids that don't care about Black lives. What they care about is the destruction of this country. I think they've hijacked a great opportunity for us to talk about issues of race. And I don't consider myself a person who hates anybody. I don't consider issues of race as far as, if you're the best person for the job, then you should be getting the job, plain and simple. And when they talked about systemic racism in county government, I could tell you, I don't practice it and I haven't seen evidence of it. In fact, I think our county government tries to in its hiring practice and its policies, to be as inclusive as possible. Now, I will tell you something that I think through this evolution in this campaign that I've become very well aware of, that there are small businesses, many of them African-American owned business and Haitian-American owned business, that don't get access to county business because of the rules that have been baked. So for example, if a small business that happens to be owned by a Haitian-American wants to get a contract at the county and can't afford to put the bond up that is required, that kind of eliminates them from being able to get the work. So one of the things I'd like to do immediately upon being mayor is look at our procurement process and look at a level of job work that we might be able to make available, but not as a quota, to other small businesses so they could compete. And I think one of the biggest impediments for small businesses, primarily African-American and Haitian-American business owners, is this bond issue that we would require to put up a bond before you get a job. And that could be an eliminator immediately. But, I apologize for the comments that my brother made. They're his comments, so he has to own them. I have offered to meet with African-American leaders and bring not just my brother, my other brother too, because I want them to get an idea of how we were raised in my family. And I think it's something that I seek out so that we could have a dialogue. Because again, I want to be mayor for everybody. And in order to be mayor for everybody, people are going to have to trust that what I'm working on is not against anybody in our community. On the contrary, it's try to lift everybody in our community.
With systemic racism, what do you actually just touched on it, but I would like for you to articulate what is systemic racism for you, and if you saw it in the county, how you would address it.
Well, I think there could be a hint of it, like I said, in the procurement process of our county, and I've already stated on how I'd like to be able to address it. When we talk about systemic racism, in my mind, that means almost like a conspiracy amongst people to eliminate or keep somebody down. Now, I don't participate in that, so it's very difficult for me to identify it. I'm not close to the idea that there isn't racism in our community. Yes.
Correct.
And I'll share you a story. When I was a kid, I remember going with my dad to an auto shop and a person calling my dad, I don't know if this is a bad word or not, a spick, and calling him a Cuban spick and telling him to go back to Cuba. And I must have been maybe 12 years old at the time. And it was the first time I ever heard that anything like that. I was raised amongst, in a Cuban community. So I'm more than aware. And as time goes by, thank God, through education, through evolution of just the human spirit, we've gotten away from it. But, for me, I don't participate in there's no room that I've walked into where we said, well, we're going to eliminate this group of people or we're going to block this group of people. If that was to happen, I'd call it out. I wouldn't have any problems calling it out. I've been raised in this community. I've seen the evolution of this community. We're not the Miami-Dade County of the 1980s. I mean, today's Miami-Dade County, I believe, through training practices, through education in our school system, just through awareness, through interaction, I think we've gone light years from where we were. But, if I did see systemic racism, heck, I'll call it out, absolutely.
And I think from where I sit, specifically the procurement process, that, in fact, from where I sit, that is systemic racism. Because
then it needs to be addressed.
I know that I personally, if I went for it, I would not qualify, not because that I can't do the job, but they put another barrier which will require for me to have the finances in order to do it, and I cannot. And they know that maybe a minority woman would not be able to have that or fulfill that part of the process.
And so I think we agree on something like that. And as I stated, wherever it's called out as a public person, as a commissioner, and hopefully mayor, then I have a duty to dive into that and investigate. I do believe that there are small businesses, and that impacts in inappropriate numbers, probably African American and Haitian business owners, that rulemaking. So my question would be very simple. Naomi, I want to be able to get you this job or give you this job. You qualified. If I remove the bond component and say, as a county, I'm going to assume that liability under a very clear rule. If you mess up, Naomi, you'll never get county work ever.
So there's a consequence.
So there's a consequence, right? And I think that's ways that we could work together. The way the counties try to fix it, though, I think forces people like you to have to go and jump into somebody's team, and then you don't get the lion's share of the work. And that's where I think we have failed. If that is systemic racism, then it needs to be addressed aggressively. But I think it's just a baking of procurement process that is flawed in a way to take care of the county interest, which I understand greatly. We want to give work to people. We want to make sure that they're insured and bonded. But at the same time, we're eliminating a huge pool of contractors and workers qualified that could do work that'll never be able to sniff any kind of county work. And that's wrong.
Commissioner, Florida makes up the largest population of Haitians living in the United States. In Miami-Dade County, we are the third largest ethnic group. Today, please tell us, why does the Haitian vote matter to you?
Well, first and foremost, they're residents of Miami-Dade County, and their vote matters to me just like any other group here, any other individual that's a registered voter. But there's something particular with the Haitian American community that I think it's important that I share. First and foremost, we have Caribbean blood. So Cuban Americans and Haitians share a DNA. And I have seen in my interactions with the Haitian community a couple of fundamental things that speaks to my experience. Number one, family-oriented culture. That's beautiful. And that, to me, is the foundation of solid communities. So there is this tight-knit family nucleus that I admire and respect, hardworking. I still joke with a lot of my Haitian friends that are Democrats. I have no idea why they're Democrats, because in my opinion, Haitian Americans don't want a handout. They just want not even a hand up. Just take your hand out of the way. Don't interfere. Let me work. And that speaks, to not having government interaction, not having a government intrusion. People of faith. To me, it speaks a lot to the same experience I have in my community. I represent a lot of folks that just for the sake of the color of their skin are just like Haitian Americans. They're business owners, hardworking.
Hard workers.
Those that rush home to make sure their kids are getting a good education are not going to tolerate any back talk from their kids. I grew up with, I remember as a kid the term tapaoca, which is you spoke out of turn, you're going to get smacked in the mouth. So to me, I see a lot of similarities, I think I could speak to that community, and I could speak to them in a matter-of-fact way, because I think I understand a lot of the same interactions that they want in their communities. They want peace and tranquility. They want the same thing that people want in Hialeah. Absolutely. I want to be the mayor that delivers that.
Commissioner, let's talk about your priorities. You have a 4x4 plan which contains 16 objectives that you want to accomplish in 4 years. Tell us about that.
I think we need to achieve transparency, number one. People need to feel that their government is working in their best interest and we're doing it in a transparent way. I think we need to get away from that image of cronyism in the county, that only inside or only the same usual suspects are the ones that end up getting all the deals in the county. I think that's wrong. It's flat out wrong. I want to be a person who lays out the agenda, and we're going to collaborate as we get that agenda completed. And we're going to do it as a community. I think what we have seen in our community is that if you are straight and honest, show them the deliverables you want, our community has been extremely supportive, whether it's a bond issue, whether it's taking care of septic tank issues, taking care of our bay, transportation, housing. Let's do it in a transparent way so people see that there's good intent in what we're doing. Oftentimes, everything we do in county government, Naomi, there's a question mark. Do we need this? And it's just to get somebody get money, somebody get paid. I think that's a sad narrative, that in order for our county to move forward, there always has to be a question mark about their integrity and their wanting to get things done. Since I got to the Board of County Commission, I fulfilled exactly the things I said I was going to work on. I've worked on transportation. We've now created more alternative sources of funding for transportation than ever before. I said we were going to do term limits. We have term limits in our county. I said that before I left the Board of County Commission, we were going to see transportation projects coming on. They're coming on. I think we need to be people of commitment that serve. And to me, that speaks to my plan. It speaks to what I want to do. I want people to go to my website at stevebovo.com and see what we've done and what we propose to do. And I want people to hold me to it, and I get it.
Absolutely. The next question, I would like to go back with one of the answers you gave. You stated that with a budget of $9 billion, one mayor cannot do the job all by himself or all by herself. There needs to be a team of individuals in order to do that. As Haitian Americans, we want to be a part of, we want to be at the table, and we also want to be a part of the process. How will you ensure that communities like Haitian American communities that are sometimes just left out, and that's just the truth. Yeah. Many times we are left out. How are you going to ensure that we are not left out, that we are a part of the process, and that we see you as a mayor for all?
Naomi, I'm not interested in transactional relationships. I'm interested in building relationships. And as I said, once I stepped out of the comfort zone of what I've represented all my life, I realized that these are long-term relationships that I want to invest in. I realize as mayor, in order for me to be successful in everything I want to do, we need to be in a relationship that goes beyond just an interview. Okay, yeah, so absolutely. What we're doing here today is something that would have to be repeated multiple times under the 4 years of my mayorship, understanding that this is the way we build that trust. This is the way we build, I think, a better community. The mayor is going to have a team of people. that are going to surround him and advise him. I could pretty safely tell you there'll be a Haitian American voice in that inner circle of people that are going to be advising the mayor.
And we can hold you to that.
You could hold me to it. There's going to be directors that are going to be, the mayor today calls them deputy mayors. I'm not sure if I'd call them the same thing. He followed a lot of the Giuliani rule of thinking as far as how he did government. I admire a lot of the Giuliani New York at one time, and about law and order, safety. You saw New York boom, which begs the question, how the heck did New York go from Giuliani's New York to de Blasio's New York? Maybe that's for another program.
Well, you know, he has a lot of flaws. We're not even going to go there, but he has a whole lot of flaws. Nevertheless, there were some specific things that happened that did change the landscape of New York for the better.
Right.
But,
right.
you know,
I do think that any mayor would be wise to make sure that there are folks in his, what I would call cabinet, for lack of a better term, that not only could help be bridges into the community, understand the communities, and could be strong advocates for communities. And that, I think, would only make me a better mayor in the long run. So it's a commitment I think is easily made.
Well, Commissioner Bovo, thank you so very much for being here. Again, we understand that these are the final days. You could have chosen to be anywhere else. As a member of the Haitian American community, I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to continuing this conversation with you. I think that regardless of what happens, we should be a part of the conversation with the council at the county for them to really understand where we stand, what we want. And so when they're making their decision, they're thinking about us. And that can only happen when there are honest dialogues that includes everybody, and you are able to be present and you are able to say, listen, this is where I stand. I've shared with many individuals that during forums, through during debates, you get to really understand the character of the person. You know, some people, they'll give you an answer based on the audience. And then some people, they'll flat out tell you, no, this is not who I am. This is not what I believe. And that's that. We need to have a space where all exists. We accept the individual for what they're presenting to us, and we find ways to work with one another.
Should be that way, right?
It should. It should.
At the end of the day, we're all in this thing together. I think we're a very, very diverse community. That plays to our benefit. That's why people come to South Florida, for the diversity, a very cosmopolitan. We have all the ingredients here to be really an example. We are the capital of the Americas or the Caribbean, without a doubt. Let's embrace that diversity and acknowledge we're not divided. We're really not a divided community. I think there's probably 8 out of 10 things that we all universally agree on. And then the other 2 we could throw out the door, as you know, and those are the ones obviously that get highlighted. But I appreciate this opportunity. I want to continue the engagement and this conversation. And you know, you've seen me now in different areas. I say the same thing wherever I'm going. You know, I don't want to pander, because I think our community has been done. They're fed up with pandering.
Absolutely.
Let's just have straight talk. We have issues. Let's address them together.
Commissioner Bovo, at this time, you're going to look to your camera and you're going to make your address to the Haitian American community. Why should they vote for Steve Bovo to become the next mayor of Miami-Dade County?
Well, again, I thank you, Naomi, and I thank you all for listening in on a Sunday afternoon. I think we are coming into the most important election we've ever had in Miami-Dade County. This is an important election nationwide, obviously. A lot of polarizing comments, figures, and issues in our community. But I want you all to, for a second, forget the circus above and think in terms of local government and what you would like your local government to do for you, and the services that you rely on for your, just your daily quality of life. I'm Steve Bovo, and I'm working hard not only just to be your mayor, but to create relationships in our community that could go beyond just mere service, to make sure that we could understand each other better, communicate with each other better, make a better community for Miami-Dade County. I have number 80 on the ballot, and I would ask you and remind you, election is now going on. People are now voting in this election. Soon they'll start early voting, and then November 3rd is the day of the final opportunity to vote. I ask for your vote. I ask for your consideration. Go to my website at stevebovo.com. You will see what our vision is, what we've done. And if I'm elected mayor, I commit to you that we will work together. We will work together to, in a united way, move our county in the right direction and not turn our county into things that it can't do or can't fulfill. That would be a disservice. So thank you all, and God bless you all.
Thank you so very much for tuning in. To tout Haïtien Américain qui branché, merci beaucoup que vous te prend temps ça dimanche après-midi ça pour te informer tête ou pour connaître issue pour connaître moun nan pour comprendre qui ça et qui fait moun nan te choisi pour li run for office, qui ça le t'a remen poter. Nous pas dire qui est pour voter, nous pas dire qui gens pour nous voter, mais responsabilité nous, c'est pour nous poter candidat yo ba ou pour qu'a faire yon choix. Encore, non moi c'est Naomi Blemure, moi c'est Hosu après-midi ça, nous connaissons que ça fait 2 ans et demi depuis n'a poté candidat ba ou. Nous poté candidat qui t'a run for State Attorney's Office, State Representative, State Senator, County Commissioner, City Clerk, City Mayor, City Council, et même juge, nous pouvons juge qui a couru pour Circuit Court Judge and County Court Judge. Nous fait devoir pas nous pour nous connecter avec candidat sa yo et puis pour nous voter candidat sa yo pour même. Pour qui ça? Pour ou même ou qu'a fait choix pas. Pas quitter personne qui a dit qui gens pour voter ou qui est pour voter. Responsabilité ça c'est pour ou même pour assurer que vous fait la conscience ou connaissons un pouvoir qui dans monde. Mamie a voté, grand-mère a voté, petite a voté, papa a voté, petite a voté. Responsabilité pas c'est pour assurer tout le monde qui la caillou. 3 novembre 2020 tout le monde voter.